Thanks everybody for joining. Welcome to this week's session. I am happy to have our Chief Product Officer, Naveneeth, back with us. AR and denials are always a hot topic. So this week we're going to focus on how to create more efficiency within your AR team. So welcome back, Naveneeth. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Okay.
All right, let's jump right in. So what AR and denial trends are you seeing in the market right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend that we are seeing that we are seeing among our customers also is the trend that outstanding AR continues to increase and denials continue to increase. According to a latest survey that I was reviewing, I think denials have been going up 20% over the last 5 years. So many organizations are kind of reaching that danger zone of 10% of outstanding AR being kind of denials, which effectively means fairly complicated kind of amount of effort to actually kind of resolve. Of course, COVID accelerated some of it because a lot of the COVID-related claim and procedure setups actually were a problem that in many kind of surveys, providers have kind of said greater than 40% of COVID-related claims initially ended up in denials, right? And according to the MGMA, recently service respondents have said that average of 17% kind of denials in the physician group space, which is fairly high, right? And in some cases, as high as 60% of claims kind of get either rejected or have other issues that are occurring to them, right, within kind of the AR space. So this is all, I'd say, collectively contributing to a very large amount of outstanding AR problem, which we're here to talk about, and also leading to aging AR. The other problem that I kind of see with this trend is kind of the average cost of working claim or denial is roughly $25. At a practice level, right? So that does add to a significant administrative cost burden to the providers.
Are you still seeing staffing challenges being a problem, shortages with providers?
Yeah, I think staffing continues to be a significant problem across our entire customer base that we have talked to. I think everybody is seeing actually shortage across the entire value stream of revenue cycle, everything from patient access to coding to AR and appeals teams. Many of the organizations are reporting, I mean, larger hospitals are reporting roughly 100 open vacancies at any time in these spaces. And it kind of makes sense because a lot of these people got displaced during the Great Resignation, and they found that jobs in, I want to say, both non-traditional healthcare and non-healthcare offerings seem to attract folks with these skill sets, right? Especially folks who've had skill sets around understanding kind of finance and metrics associated to it. So they've seen other positions open up for them. The other thing a lot of our customers are talking to us about is the fact that even if you can hire new people, revenue cycle is fairly complex, right? Most people outside of healthcare don't appreciate the complexity of revenue cycle. And so training kind of new staff to kind of take on any of these functions is both time consuming and also a burden on the existing staff because they have to now step out of their jobs and kind of help train these people. And if there are any quality issues or errors, they seem to kind of directly impact collections of revenue, right? So these are all kind of netting out in terms of, I would say, revenue impact when it comes to staffing. Many of our customers are trying to overcome this by offering better pay and building a better culture with their revenue cycle teams. And I've talked to many of the CFOs and revenue cycle leaders talking about how they're trying to work a better culture into the revenue cycle teams, but they still, at the end of the day, they're still kind of hurting from the staffing challenges, actually.
I think we all hoped that the staffing shortages would kind of start to mellow out a bit, but they certainly have not. And you brought up a really good point with the training. I think all of us in our respective areas have seen just how challenging it can be to bring on someone without a healthcare background.
Yeah,
it's easy for
it's a
somebody
different
else.
language. Yeah,
It
it's a
is.
different language.
It really is.
Yeah, I tell people you have to know English and you have to know healthcare. And you have to know two languages if you want to work in healthcare. And they're different.
So true.
Um,
Yeah. I think it's easy for somebody outside of healthcare to say, oh, it's okay. You know, I've learned all these other industries, but then they get into healthcare and realize it's a whole other language, and it takes for most folks years to really catch up. So how can I evaluate my AR process and identify inefficiencies? Do you have any tips on how I can do that if I'm a provider?
Yeah, I think I mean, when you think about AR broadly, and again, it depends on how organizations are structured. Many organizations have dedicated AR appeals teams that kind of work the AR. I think the first question you have to kind of ask yourself is, how do you evaluate your AR and how does it get kind of worked or prioritized within the organization? A lot of the organizations, the biggest challenge I see in terms of inefficiency is kind of the lack of good system support when it comes to AR. I mean, billing and practice management systems are great books of records. They're great at kind of sending out a claim or integrating with a clearinghouse to trigger an 837. But they are not great at managing work when work volumes become high. What I mean by that is the workflow is fairly rudimentary. There may be some work queue or structures associated to it, but there's very limited ability to kind of organize and allocate work. So the first question that folks have to look at when you think about inefficiency is, how do you evaluate your current AR and how do you prioritize it, right? And what we find in most organizations is that evaluation of what is outstanding is limited. What that means is that many times by the time you realize you have an AR problem, you're sitting on very large numbers. And a lot of it is actually starting to age, right? That's somewhat reactive. So if you can identify how to evaluate what is outstanding in terms of AR and how do you prioritize it, is going to be key. The next question to ask is, are you adequately staffed given your process, right? Because whether we like it or not, a lot of the AR related processes still continue to be manual in nature. So what that means is that you need to be able to match staffing to the outstanding AR that you're trying to work. Today, teams have very limited analytics. When I say that, that doesn't mean that you don't know how many people are there or what average number of, I would say, charges of claims or AR outstanding can a person work. I mean, but those averages are very simple math, right? It's not the same. And I'll give you a simple example. If you had all AR from a single glue and you're trying to go manage it, it may be much easier as you're trying to, because of the processes or whether you go to a portal or do the appeals, it'll be standard. But if you had the same 100 AR, not from a single pair, but 10 different pairs with 10 different portals, 10 different appeal processes, now the amount of average effort that goes into doing the same 100 AR is no longer the same. So understanding whether you're adequately staffed is critical. For that, you have to better understand your AR, understand how it's structured. And if you don't have that, then you essentially will have most organizations that we discuss with end up having an understaffing problem. And understaffing usually leads to AR aging, which leads to write-off, right? So that's kind of the next thing, is to understand, are you adequately staffed? The next in the process is to kind of identify, are you working the right AR, right? That's a bigger question, a little more complex question to answer compared to kind of how many people you have and how much AR you have. Because all AR is not equal, unfortunately. but organizations don't have the, I would say, tools to be very nuanced about the kind of AR that you're working, right? In many cases, you're working high dollar. In some cases, folks look at filing limits and try to kind of touch on everything that is kind of coming to filing limits or high dollars. But that does not mean that you can actually collect on all of them, or you don't know how much effort is actually required to collect on all of them. So it'll be good to kind of start, I would say, segmenting your AR down by pairs or the type of issues that the AR has. Is it a denial? Is it a rejection? Is it what kind of outstanding AR are you dealing with? And again, denials not being same, a prior art denial might be much more difficult to overturn than an eligibility, or coding needs a coder to actually work on it. So you need to be able to kind of segment your ER down into more details if you really want to be able to understand. Do you have kind of a mechanism to work all of it, or what do we prioritize? Right? That's kind of the other area that you need to look at and identify if you have efficiencies built into that process. And then again, I would say last but not least, it's important to understand how much of this work is being done manually. Are you actually using the right tools to do the work? A lot of PR and appeal over the last, I would say, 5+ years have started to move to become more online. It was very much a phone, fax, send us letter kind of a process. We're seeing payers more and more have online appeal processes or portals to check statuses on outstanding claims. Are you really using all the tools? Now, it's not easy because there's so many payers and so many different tools to work with. And teams do have fatigue in terms of the number of kind of credentials they just have to manage to get on these portals. But it's important to use web as a good source to actually do this, because it actually does reduce. I mean, average call times, we've seen organizations, we have done some measures, average call times to some of the tools are actually roughly 30 minutes on the phone. So if you want to actually increase the productivity, you want to be able to look at how much manual work is done and how are you doing this manual work, right? The other thing is, in many cases, manual work goes back to whether you're kind of doing the right work, right? So evaluate kind of the process to understand if the work is value generating. What I mean by that is you've touched an AR, you send it an appeal. Now, re-looking at that AR, that charge for a period of time, or checking status on it on a regular basis, is not going to add value, because there is a certain amount of time before the payer is going to pay you. So it's important to kind of say, okay, I want to put that to the side and work on things that immediately need my attention, because there's real kind of work associated to it. So knowing which AR that you're working and whether it's actually generating value outcome is the other area I would say focus on. So you have to take the entire life cycle, everything from understanding and analyzing the AR all the way to kind of how do you work the AR. Hopefully that made sense. It gives some color to how we can think about process.
Thanks, Naveneeth. That was helpful. Any data and reports that you can suggest that will help providers identify any red flags in their process?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about AR, I think there are what I call lagging indicators and leading indicators. I would say when you think about bad debt and write-off in GCRs, they tend to be kind of lagging indicators. You're kind of late by the time those numbers actually turn off. I would say AR aging, most important. You want to look at kind of how you're aging over 90, 120 is starting to trend. You have to start looking at what your denial trends look like. Easier said than done, because it takes more work to actually dive into it. But at least having a good trend analysis of where your denials are headed, where your credit balances are headed, how much of your denials are getting overturned by appeals, and then what's your cost to collect, right? I mean, how much effort are you putting into collect? Sometimes that is an important decision making to decide on and prioritize what you're working. So in essence, you want to start with some of these lagging indicators that actually tell you where your AR stands. But on the front end, And this is where I see gaps today. Providers really don't have capabilities to actually measure are they working the right thing. So there isn't a mechanism to measure productivity or truly understand how much effort went into a certain claim to get paid on. But if there was a mechanism to understand that, there was a way to measure that, that would give you a leading indicator. How much of AR liquidation are you able to achieve over a period of time? What is your run rate on AR liquidation? These would be some what I call leading indicators that tell you, are you going to be able to get the AR over 90, 120 in control, or are you going to kind of spin out of control, or do you need to get more staff to work it? These would be, I think, I would say some leading indicators. If you're not working it down, your collections are not going up, yield is not going up, then I would say those are early red flags, and then they'll usually translate into higher aging and denial write-off rates in the back end. So I would say just start with leading indicators, make sure that you've evaluated the leading indicators. Hopefully you have the ability to do that. If not, get tools and analytics to help you with that. And then of course, you always want to have some of the standard HFMA map key metrics that you look in the back end to ensure that you're actually managing your AR well.
Great. How can technology play a role in streamlining AR and denials in terms of process?
Yeah, so again, as a technologist, I think I believe technology is a key enabler to it. And if you see what has happened over the last couple of years with COVID and with the staffing shortage that we just talked about, organizations have realized that we are not going to outrun this, and there is no going back to the normal, right? I don't think we're going to ever go back to where we started and say things are going to just get back to it. Now you add to it the general inflationary pressures that we are going to face, which actually is going to cause wage inflation. Essentially, there's no rolling back to the current stages. Which means I would say RCM and AR leaders effectively have to look at technology as the primary kind of underpinning to streamlining the process. And I kind of think about the overall process in terms of, I would say, 4 steps, right? And I'll kind of quickly touch on it. I call it kind of analyze, predict, prioritize, realize. And let me just kind of quickly elaborate on them. So analyze is kind of, first, we talked about it a little bit in terms of looking at these leading and lagging indicators. You want to be constantly evaluating your AR, but you want the ability to have analytics that can help you dive deeper, right? So it's not enough to say what's your outstanding AR or what the denials. You want to know which payers, what facilities, what procedures are leading to these gaps that you can actually work. You want the ability to, from a denial perspective, have ability, the technology today, especially around AI, machine learning, can help you with kind of denial hotspot analysis, waterfall analysis from a collection perspective. So you have a sense for what is it that you're working that is actually leading to money, right? It also helps identify what is the real workable inventory that you should actually work on rather than work on all AR. Because as I said before, all AR not being equal, you want to focus on AR that is going to generate value, right? So this is where kind of the next step comes in, which is where AI and machine learning, we believe, have strong capabilities because they have the ability to learn from payer reimbursement outcomes, right? And so machine learning is great at kind of pattern analysis around these notions of what outcome did we have for working in AR, right? So if we can actually codify the work we did against it and kind of generate what outcome it generated in terms of reimbursement or collections, then we can actually have machine learning models that can actually evaluate and predict for a new incoming charge that is sitting in AR, whether you'll get paid on it, whether they'll get denied, they'll be completely paid, partially paid. You can actually make very accurate prediction on whether that can be paid out. Now, if you take that and now you think about, okay, here is a AR that I think is going to pay X amount of dollars. Now you start adding other variables, like how many people do you have? How many pairs are you working in the mix? What is the mode of recovery, right? I mean, you have to send paper, or you want to send faxes associated to the appeal, or is it on portals? You have to be on the phone. If you can actually consider these variables, technology has the ability to kind of look at some of these variables, and then you can actually understand kind of throughput yield associated to these inflow, right? So how much more of these AR is coming your way, right? And what is the variations associated to it? Usually, if we can bring that together, there are technical capabilities, particularly around multivariate kind of modeling and multivariate kind of math, that allows you to consider all of these variables together and kind of say, hey, I want to recover the most amount of dollars. And it allows you to then decide what claims or what charges would you want to prioritize, right? This is somewhat of a complex math, but the technology exists for most of this to understand and exactly prioritize. So if you have 10 people and you have 10,000 outstanding charges, you're not going to be able to work all outstanding charges, right? I mean, if we had infinite resources, we would work all charges, which means what? Which means we have to prioritize. And these algorithms are very good at helping you understand which ones of the 10,000 should you prioritize today, right? Versus tomorrow, versus the next week. So if we can do that, I think technology can play a very strong role in kind of helping kind of this analyze, predict, prioritize. And last but not least, and as I talked about it, right, automation is, I mean, everybody is talking about it. I think every aspect of revenue cycle is going to be touched with automation. And you want to be able to employ automation into the process. But the interesting problem with employing automation is that it's not a zero-sum game, in the sense that you automate all of it or you automate some of it, which means if you don't have good workforce management capabilities, so this is where technology can help again, is that you can have a workforce management capability that can help allocate work, manage, monitor the recovery activities. And it can also orchestrate automation, right? Because for an example, you have an incoming AR, somebody works at, there is human knowledge work involved. So you have an AR resource working at, somebody has to make a contact with the pair, whether that is online or through the phone. But once that is done, hey, we just have to monitor for the next week whether this claim is getting paid. And maybe there is a bot that can evaluate it, right? So there are multiple forms of automation that can evaluate it. But now you can see that you have to be able to orchestrate automation in these steps along with the managed step, right? So at some point, if it's not paid, maybe a human needs to pick up a phone and call the payer to understand where it stands. But until then, maybe not, right? So you want workforce management capabilities and automation capabilities that can actually be orchestrated. But last but not least, I think we kind of talk about this a lot, but you have to be able to measure value, and measuring value is a function of having the right amount of metrics and analytics that should help you understand, are you doing better, right? And technology can absolutely play an important role in providing that analytics, right? Is your staff working on things that is generating value? Are you liquidating AR faster? Is yield higher, right? Are you getting cash through the door faster? So all of this, I would say, can be kind of enabled through technology, right? Now, I mean, the way I describe it, it might sound like kind of some RCM science fiction of like machines and humans working all together and in unison with machine learning and AI. But to be honest, it is not. A lot of this is kind of here and now in terms of technology capabilities. And I think they exist to kind of, you don't have to implement all of it, but if you can find solutions in this life cycle that can help you streamline your processes, you will start to make those incremental progresses.
Any last minute words of wisdom that you would like everyone to leave with?
The only thing I would say is that, I mean, I think I would think of it as more a call to action than what's wisdom, is that I think the notion of evaluating your process, understanding inefficiencies, and looking at solutions to streamline is more or less now. Because the current challenges that we face, as I said earlier, again, there are no indicators telling us that we are somehow going to kind of just overcome them next week or next month or next year. So the quicker we get to solving these problems, the more efficient it becomes as we continue to improve.
Good call to action. Thanks again, Naveneeth, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you, Kate.